Hello, everyone. Thank you for watching this video. I get the privilege again of hanging out with Dave McPherson, a registered provisional psychologist with us here at Masters. Big congratulations to you, Dave. You just recently passed your EPPP exam. How'd that go?
This is a big win. Oh my gosh, Matthew, the relief. Yeah.
Those of you that are not aware, the EPPP is like an ethics exam. There's so much to it, a lot of work. So well done, Dave. Yeah, you're welcome. My name is Matthew. I have the privilege of being a part of the team at Masters. I'm not a therapist. I get to enjoy these conversations. I feel like it's almost like I get free therapy. So thank you, Dave. Every once in a while, I will work an evening shift or a weekend shift. And so love to connect if you ever are calling and I'm the person answering the phone. Today, we have a really cool topic I'm excited to chat with you, Dave, about. And as I mentioned before we started, I feel like this is if there was to be a title for this, it's like real conversation. This is going to be really, in my opinion, not very, well, it's going to be lots of discussion around psychology, but I almost think like it's almost more philosophical than anything. But do you mind if I jump right into the first question?
Please do.
Okay. So first question I wanted to throw at you is, why do so many of us go through life carrying beliefs or thoughts that we've never actually questioned?
Yeah, I mean, what a good question. Yeah, that self-reflective piece, right? It's the things you don't know, right? And the things you don't know. It's kind of that kind of question of it. It's you're just sort of carrying on going through your life. And it's like, I didn't even know that there was something I didn't know here.
Can I interject for a moment, Dave?
Yeah.
Obviously, acknowledging confidentiality. It's kind of a standard belief or thought that people naturally are kind of faced with in your experience in therapy that maybe they didn't know. First one that comes to mind for me is how many negative statements we make about ourselves. But is there a specific one that you can think of that comes to mind that might frame the conversation?
Well, that's probably a better example because it's a little later than what I was thinking.
Now I'm interested in what that one is, but
For
we'll say
sure. Yeah. No, absolutely. That's a common thing is just sort of that negative self-talk when you don't even realize you're doing it, right? Until you've got maybe a good buddy or friend or something's like, why are you so hard on yourself all the time? Right. And kind of calls that out in you. You didn't even see it. You didn't even know that. Yeah. So that can be really helpful to kind of talk through and have other people kind of identify, like, I wonder where that's coming from or what some of my beliefs about myself might be, or my relationship patterns growing up that sort of informed some of that pattern of behavior. Things like that. Yeah, I mean, the one I was thinking of are like kind of the almost deeper, heavier ones. It's like I'm unimportant or I'm not worth it or no one cares, right? So that sort of layer of aloneness is really, really heavy, or I'm not loved or not lovable. Those ones are really hard and they can really inform a lot of our self-concept and then our behaviors and certainly our cognitions, our way of thinking of things. Yeah.
wow. Do you see that both?
I
Oh,
like
that's great.
your example. Yeah.
Well, that's
Yeah.
a great, I mean, I think what my thought, more the one I said was like a thought, but yours was a belief. I mean, we don't typically say I believe, but it's like, I am unworthable. That's a belief statement versus I didn't feel valued in that moment. That's a thought.
Yeah.
I guess maybe my one question is, do you see this unawareness of beliefs and thoughts we say about ourselves? Do you see it right across age, gender, all sorts of demographics?
I mean, I think I would say yes, I do. Manifestations would be different because in my experience, sort of the longer you live with these ideas, the more practiced you are at maybe covering them up or suppressing some of those voices or living with them. Whereas some of the kids I work with, it's a little more immediate, right? So you can see the distress a little more clearly in the relationship and the conversations with things, so you can work on them.
And if I can interject for a moment, Dave. So as a non-therapist, like the word manifestations sounds like something from the movie Exorcist. But like what, I mean, in this sense, what does the word manifestation mean?
I suppose all I was meaning with that is how it presents to the world or how it shows. Yeah. What that belief looks like when it's sort of born out in our behaviors.
Right.
Yeah, or our speech. Yeah, that's how I use the word. Maybe I'm using the word wrong. I don't even know.
No, I think again, it's funny how like I come as an engineer, I come into some conversations and I'll use words and I'll be like, that word didn't translate in this industry. So anyways, I heard that word manifest. I'm like, that's a word that's used in a lot of different environments in different capacities. Yeah. I mean, as you mentioned, it's what's presenting, how we're seeing that particular thing manifest. I guess, well, my follow-up question to that is, I mean, I think a lot of us, we inherently know there's these beliefs or thoughts, but sometimes we just don't even know how to put the words to those thoughts. Why is it that it can be sometimes so hard to put our thoughts and feelings or beliefs into words?
Yeah, that's the greatest question. I feel that one. Yeah. That can be really, really hard when intuitively you're like, oh, something's just off or something's not right or I'm not sure. And being able to like identify that so flaky. One of the things I use in therapy with people a ton is this little pillow that I've got. And the pillow is just, it's actually a pillow cover, but on
Is
it
it
is the emotion wheel. And it's just, you know what I'm talking about.
Absolutely, yeah. We have a
Um,
bunch of them at the office.
they're so helpful because they just help us figure out it's like a diagnostic. It's like you're helping you figure out what it is that you're feeling, like the emotion that's there that you can't quite put the right word on. But oh man, Matthew, like when I've used this on myself, it's been super helpful. But with so many clients, it's like when we finally figure out, it's like, oh, that's what it is. That's what I'm feeling. Like the relief that people feel in that, right? And it's suddenly a kind of renewed sense of hopefulness. It's like, oh, okay, yeah, that's what's going on here. Because it previously been sort of like a mystery to yourself, right? It's
Right.
like something's not right. And it's funny how like the different layers of emotion get kind of mixed. Like you can have, think you're really angry, but actually maybe you're just really sad. You're feeling maybe powerless or something like that. And so using a tool, gosh, it's so helpful to
Mm.
figure out what's actually going on there.
Well, I love when people talk about the emotion wheel. I've used it as well, and maybe I'll put a link in the chat or
Yeah.
in the transcript for this video to the emotion wheel or to a standard emotion wheel. But I always love talking with guys. I'm like, "What are you feeling?" And
Hmm.
the answer is almost always anger
Yeah.
or frustration.
Right.
Those are the two emotions that us guys we feel.
Yeah.
And I relate to that. I redhead, I jokingly say
Mm.
I have redhead rage. And what I have come to realize as I've, to use your language, peeled back the onion a little
Yeah.
bit is it actually wasn't anger, but that's the only socially acceptable outlet that was able to do,
Yeah.
but also the only emotion I had language for. But when I was able to peel it back, there was actually so many other
Mm.
emotions or so
Yeah.
many other thoughts that manifested in anger.
Yeah, it's really interesting for me because I do hear this a lot. Like, yeah, men often will come to me seeking help with some like emotional regulation because it's like anger is just creating havoc in their home or workplace or whatever. And so it's really helpful just kind of going through a process of what all's going on there. It's quite interesting for me though because I'm almost the inverse of that, where I often will just sort of think I'm sad or depressed or whatever, when actually I'm angry. So
Interesting.
it's often the flip for me, where it's helpful for me to realize it's like, oh no, I'm perceiving something I think is unjust. And
Interesting.
for me, it's being borne out more as a sadness. But when I think about it, it's like, oh, actually I'm angry here. I just don't know what to do with that. I didn't really grow up with like a lot of anger in my household or anything like that. It's not like an emotion I really saw expressed a ton. Anyway, that's total side tangent there, but it was useful for me even to go through that process of seeing it's like, oh, actually for me this is what that is, and I'd thought of it wrong. I thought I was just a sad neurotic person when it's actually, oh, I see something that shouldn't be, and
Mhm.
I'm actually angry about that, but I don't know what to do with it. Yeah,
What I love about what you just said that were fascinating. One is family of origin.
yeah,
So you mentioned that you come from a family where maybe anger wasn't something that was present in your childhood. I came from a family where anger it presented in lots of different ways, and not trying to blame a person. I could think 3 or 4 generations back of people who struggled
mm,
with anger. I come from that type of, and so it presents that way. But the other thing is what I love is what you're saying, and I've lost my train of thought with that, but was that we're trying to actually understand the deeper root of what's actually causing the
mm,
emotion.
yeah,
We're trying to get, and one of the questions I had, you talked about how you do emotional regulation with a lot
mm,
of guys. If I could be cynical, when I hear the word emotional regulation as a guy, I think of like you're coming into a room and somebody's doing breathing exercises or singing Kumbaya with you. I know, being that I've done emotional regulation with a therapist, I know it's that. But what goes into emotional regulation that, and how does that help people in their everyday lives?
oh, I mean, it helps a ton, especially in a lot of but even for like a lot of kids kind of on the playground, they just sort of like get so much emotion in response to whatever unfairness in a game or something like that that it leads to hard words or whatever, things that happen on a playground. So like finding some strategies that help with that, oh man, it's been massively helpful for people young. And so one of those things is a little bit of kind of in counseling circles, I call it psychological education, psychoed, with clients. We do some of that, just understanding different areas of the brain, different brain function, the role and purpose of the limbic system, and how it sort of manages our perception of threat and
Right.
fear response and things like that. A lot of big emotion, and kind of just being aware of what's going on in our brains can be really helpful, right? Because then we can have strategies if it's like, oh, okay, this is how I want to manage this or respond to this. Be aware of what's happening. So when you talk about down regulating, it's just trying to how do I say that? It's just sort of bring some calm to like the limbic system, be the midbrain, so that you can solve some of these problems with your cortical areas. So it's like your prefrontal cortex is awesome at solving problems right there, but usually it gets kind of overridden by the limbic response when you're in the face of threat. So doing lots of different things, like they'd call it emotional flooding. And so finding out like strategies for that, identifying when you're becoming emotionally flooded, how you're going to cope with that, and then your strategy of returning to conversations or situations that have caused the threat once you've figured out, it's like, okay, this is what's going on. Kind of managing that initial response. And like a lot of things, like there's a lot of common strategy people are aware of, like the box breathing, the nasal breathing, like using your sensory awareness just to activate different areas of the brain to help with that down regulating. But all those are really helpful strategies. Like I do a lot of externalization techniques from narrative therapy, where it's trying to identify what the problem is as something other than you. Like you're not an angry person. It's just anger's kind of come in and cause some chaos in your world for a while, and then predicting when that's going to show up and what it's going to say and how you want to respond to that. It's a really helpful tool.
Yeah.
Lots of different things that I work on with clients that are like, it seems quite obvious to me as I see client like on recurring times that it's helping them. Sometimes it maybe feels a little more frustrating because you just want to flip a switch and be a completely different person. You know what I mean? But
Yes.
yeah, there's a skill building element to that emotional down regulating, just as there is emotional up regulating. Right.
Mhm.
So just like you maybe want to bring down some of the emotions that cause distress, so too you may want to induce more like happiness, joyfulness, playfulness. And you can induce a lot of those emotions in your life too with some certain strategies too. And so that can be another useful component working with some clients, right? I use gratitude exercises all the time.
Really
Yeah.
interesting. Sounds like the beginning of another video or another
Yeah.
interview.
Sure. Yeah.
I want to piggyback off one thing you said. You talked about the difference between being an angry person,
Yeah.
and I'm paraphrasing, but in struggling with anger. One is a belief system, one is a manifestation of, emotions. And, I think a lot of people, especially with anger, let's just use it like, I am angry. There's underlying shame and
Mm.
guilt there. And, where I was wanting to go with that is what role does shame play in keeping certain thoughts and beliefs buried or unspoken?
Oh man, a huge role in that, I would say. And for good and for bad. Like there are some things that shame probably keeps us from doing that's good. Like it has a useful function, right? Socially, but also personally. Like it's gonna hold you back, hopefully, from doing things that would just bring so much shame that it's like I could never do that. So it has a useful element to it, but often it can be really unhelpful and you just feel so stuck because there's the fear of exclusion, right? Like that's what shame says. You're not worthy of being part of the group, and also hard to get out of because it's like you need someone to help you come out of that, but you're so ashamed of what you've done that you just need to carry that on your own. So in terms of therapy and working with that, it's one of the people that I've come across who was so masterful at this was a fellow named Carl Rogers, and his whole therapeutic modality, his whole approach to therapy was based on this idea of unconditional positive regard. And you could never say anything that would change his view so that he would see you in a negative light.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Absolutely no conditions. And he will view you with love and with empathy. And that was his whole therapeutic approach was just empathizing with people, hearing them out, trying to see their point of view and their 90% of they did a little bit of research on how his therapy sessions would go. And 90% of it was just him trying to see things from your point of view.
Wow.
Yeah. And so his approach that I would actually say almost most therapists now incorporate some element of his therapy. That's how effective it is. It's
Wow.
yeah. But I think kind of directly addressing that idea of shame that I'm unworthy of being seen or what I'm included in. And so, yeah, one of the things I do try very hard at as a therapist is to communicate that positive regard, that attention to others, that there's nothing anyone has done that's so bad that's worthy of being completely excluded. And then creating space to talk about, okay, why do we feel this way? Why is this emotion so strong? And part of it can be telling the story, but then part of it can be addressing the fears that underline it. And I could go on and on about that particular topic, but
Yeah. I as we talk about shame, I we had one of our therapists at the office do a presentation recently on internal family systems,
Mm.
and part of that was the concept that we have these aspects of our psyche that we call protectors, or that IFS calls protectors, and how the role of a protector is to protect ourselves, and it almost like protects. I'm probably going to butcher this. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Dave. There's a wound,
Mm.
and the protector wants to protect that wound from being exacerbated. So it's trying to do a positive thing. I wonder if some of the reasons why we don't want to verbalize, so I'm going to use IFS language to validate this. I wonder if there are times where we don't want to verbalize or acknowledge the negative statement we have of ourselves. It's because it's almost like our psyche is working against us. The
Mm.
protector part of our psyche is saying, no, we're trying to protect that. So we don't want to go there. We don't want to talk about it.
Mm.
We don't want to expose that because we're going to potentially exacerbate it. But as you as a therapist would know, is that really until that wound, until that hurt, until that pain has been resolved, it's going to constantly hurt that person. I don't know if there's
Mm.
a question there, but
Yeah.
I'm curious what your thoughts are on just why do we try and protect these negative thoughts that we have of ourselves?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it'd be weird if we didn't, right? Like these are deeply vulnerable parts of us. I think IFS often talks them as exiles. They're like they're parts that are kind of kept away, right? Hidden and as you mentioned, like protected. Like there's elements that's their main function is to keep those little vulnerable parts of us really safe, right? From being hurt more or hurt again. And I mean, yeah, I've got 4 kids, and so I understand that impulse, right? It's like when your kid is vulnerable, you want to protect them, right? Like you don't want them to be hurt, and so IFS uses that kind of metaphor, I think, to give like a lens for looking at ourselves, right? It's like there's parts of us that are sort of like hurt, wounded kids, right? Like we pick up these memories as we go through life. Things hurt and create vulnerable parts of us. We don't want to be hurt again, and then we develop these mechanisms for protecting those parts. And yeah, so internal family systems is quite an interesting approach for looking at the self, right? And how these different parts can take on different functions and roles kind of strategically for the different functions that they have. But yeah, I mean, I do think when it comes to like what we've been talking about, like saying difficult things, right? And wanting to bring healing to parts of us that are hurt really bad, right? Often we don't want to talk about that, right? We don't even want to think about that often, right? We just, numb the pain through substances or through destructive behaviors or avoidant behaviors or who knows what.
Distraction.
Distraction, no doom scrolling, no kidding. Yeah.
Go to my phone. Okay, good. I'm
Yeah,
distracted.
a lot of that for sure. Yeah. And I don't know, there is an interesting element of that, right? It's like, I think we want to be healed, but then do we? Right? Like, are we ready to have those parts of us healed? Because it's hard work going in to figure out what are those vulnerable parts of me that don't want to be exposed and brought to light. Hopefully to be healed, but also maybe to be wounded again, right? So there's a fearful element there as there should be.
I've heard it described in past. It's kind of a bit of a morbid analogy, but like the idea, like imagine you were, I don't know, you went on a bike ride and you fell over and you ripped open your arm and a bunch of dirt got in there.
Mm.
And I don't know, for whatever reason, skin healed over. And from an external perspective, your arm looks perfectly fine. But the reality is there's a bunch of dirt and crap and stuff inside that was never fleshed out. And so externally, it looks perfectly fine. The second you touch that area, you know that there's something wrong. And so the reality is to actually heal it properly, metaphorically speaking, well, or literally speaking, depending on if we're talking about the analogy here, you have to cut it open, clean out the infected area, and then allow it to heal properly. Now, the beauty about, physical and medicine is that, we can numb the area. I don't think that translates into the psychological. I mean, like, I don't think we can, in a productive, healthy way, get healing while numbing ourselves to, the pain of it. Fortunately, the analogy breaks down there. I love that analogy because it's like, okay, it's going to be painful now. There's going to be pain either way. There's chronic long-term pain over here. It's probably going to get worse, or this is acute, short-term, very extremely painful. But I mean, that's one of the wonderful things about an individual coming in, processing through some of those things with you in the therapy room. And I'm going to brag on you a little bit here is you're going to create that place of forgetting what Carl Rogers' actual line, but that environment of unconditional positive regard. I got it. Segueing into, the next question I had for you is, I mean, we kind of talked about this already, but what are some of the common hidden thoughts that people carry that shape how they see themselves or others?
Oh man, there's tons. Yeah, there's so many that we could talk about. I mean, one of the I often think about in this kind of context is a whole therapeutic mode of it's called cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, very very commonly used. Kind of is built on this idea that there's certain Aaron Beck is the fellow who devised this theory, and he calls them cognitive distortions, right? So there's a lot of common ones. It's like you kind of either like magnify or minimize your role. So as example of that, like I can look back and see a million things in my life I've done wrong. That's no problem, right? But seeing the things I've done right, I really minimize those, right? So then I think, oh, I'm no good at that. I can't do that, right? That was a total failure. And so that it would be one of his. He has like 10 or 12, I think, of these cognitive distortions, ways that something happens and we just have this automatic thought and then we distort that into thinking. It's like, oh, okay, yeah. So magnifying, minimizing would be one. Catastrophizing, like only seeing the worst possible outcome. Another common thought people have. Personalizing, so like something happens and you just think, oh, it was all because of me or my role or something like that in it. Getting stuck in like should language, right, can be really distressing for some people. I mean, there's loads of these, but this therapy that Aaron Beck developed can be really helpful for people. You start to identify like, what are these just automatic thoughts that pop into my head when something happens. And so one of the things we do in therapy, so sometimes, I don't use this all the time, but you use a CBT kind of piece of called homework. They call it homework, where you create like thought records. You just try and figure out, it's like, okay, these are the things I'm thinking, and this is maybe the way I'm distorting it. And then you can think of some challenge thoughts to that. It's like, but maybe actually this is true, instead of what I thought was true. So that can be really helpful for people. It's just a skill that can be practiced a little bit in therapy and talked about and worked through. And it works pretty much entirely like at the cognitive level of figuring out your thoughts, and then you're layering on some behaviors that you want to change those. But that would be, I mean, those would be a handful like of just very common thoughts that people, or thought patterns even, that people can fall into. Some like many times I'll sort of present like a list of ways to do that, and they just make sense, right? So you realize like there's a reason there, and Beck kind of put that all together because it's like so many people do these things. They're very
Mhm.
very common, and then you can identify them. You can kind of catch yourself doing them. It's like, oh yeah, okay, all right. I don't
Yeah.
really feel like going down that path anymore. I want to go a different way, right? But until you kind of learn to identify them and learn to figure out what they're doing, the distress they're creating for you, sometimes you're just stuck there and don't know how to get out of that.
Yeah. Wow, that's really interesting. Dave, I gotta tell you, one of the things I just love about chatting with you is you're just an ordinary guy. You're
It's so
really, really intelligent. Like, I think anyone listening to this conversation will be like, wow, this
yeah,
guy's really intelligent. But you're just
yeah,
an ordinary guy. You're
yeah,
on this journey as well. Like you talked
yeah,
about how, you're really good at seeing the things that you didn't do well, but you
yeah.
struggle to see. I'm almost remiss to ask you, what's one thing that you did in the last 24 hours that you're really happy about?
The last 24 hours I'm really happy about. Let's see. I am quite happy that I was able to celebrate some big accomplishments of my kids pursuing their interests that maybe aren't necessarily wouldn't have been mine. They're on their own path, and I'm celebrating their accomplishments with them. Pretty proud of that. Yeah. You reminded me, Matthew, this awesome quote I love by a fellow named G.K. Chesterton, who says something like, "There's nothing more extraordinary in the world than an ordinary man, an ordinary woman, and their ordinary children." You ever heard that?
I
Anyway,
haven't.
they called him the Prince of Paradox, and he kind of put that together. It's kind of a beautiful way of thinking about the extraordinariness, the beautifulness of just ordinary life. Yeah.
Yeah, I really like that. I have
I
this
aspire
friend
to be very ordinary.
I have this friend who, from my perspective, is an extraordinary individual, and I tell him this all the time, but he really puts himself down. So the
Mm.
other day I was like, "Dude," won't mention his name here, I won't out him, but I was like, "You are an ordinary guy. You're just a plain Jane guy. You've chosen to live an extraordinary life.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
makes you extraordinary." Anyways, sorry, we're kinda going all over the place. I'm enjoying
We
this
are. Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah.
So, just going back to the concept of negative core beliefs like I'm not
Mm.
enough or I'm too much or whatever that negative thought is, how do negative core beliefs, how do they get formed in the first place?
Oh man, that's a good question. Yeah. And I'm certainly not an expert on working with core beliefs. Like some therapists, that's their niche in their area there. So they could certainly speak to this more than I could. But I think there's probably an aspect of it where we do inherit certain personality characteristics, right? Like there's a genetic component to who we are and why we're wired. And some folks like are wired like a little more neurotic, like I am, right? Just a little bit more. So it would be, I think that explains some component of it. I don't know if it's greater. Another component would be like we just go through life experiences, right? And we probably all remember like some pretty bad times, whether it was at school or wherever, some team or family life growing up where there's certain little parts of us, like to use the internal family systems again, that got hurt, and if that becomes like a repeated pattern, maybe could very easily develop like a core belief in you that whatever happened was the true event, right? The defining event that sets who you are. And so, like, I mean, I don't want to be too flippant here, but I don't know anybody who doesn't have like some daddy or some mommy issues, like people we grew up with, like they influence us in the biggest possible way. Like, and sometimes it can be helpful to talk about those things. Like if clients want to do that, I think probably all of us have some sentence or two that would be good to say, right? That we just sort of carry unspoken for a long time. But not everyone wants to do that. And sometimes there's more productive things we can do. So this is a real sidetrack from I think where you were going with this question, but I often use something called a solution focused approach to therapy, where it's like, I don't necessarily care how we got to where we are. It's just, where do we want to go now? And sometimes with that sense of like who we are as people, it's like, okay, I want to be different than I am. And then we work on process. Well, where do you want to go? Who do you want to be? And what steps are we going to take on that path to get there? And so I do that with clients a lot as well, because it's living in a hopeful posture, right? It's like, I want things to be good, to be satisfying, to be hopeful, joyful. Anyway, yeah. I feel like I took that in a direction that you were not intending to go, but
I love it.
yeah.
I mean, this is probably less psychological and more, but probably even to take it even further in a different direction. I've noticed that, I don't know if you can relate to this, Dave, but there's times where I can visualize an outcome. I don't know, doing something for business or for work. And I go, okay, this is what it's going to look like at the end. I'm not there yet. And I'm just going to put it all together. And then it comes out somewhat like what. And there's environments where I actually almost imagine worst scenario coming out. And sure enough, guess what happens is the worst case scenario manifests. But then there's this really weird situation I found where it's like I imagined positive, but then negative came out. And through adults' eyes, and maybe more psychologically aware eyes, if I'm really confident who I am and I go, the outcome didn't match who I could be intelligent or mature enough to say, okay, where did it go wrong from here to here? But what I did when I was maybe a little younger, actually, you know what, even recently, there was a situation where I had this, where I got the same negative outcome over and over. And suddenly the negative outcome became my belief system. And it was a really interesting situation. It's where suddenly where I was very confident in myself, I was now very insecure. Is that something you see a lot in therapy, or is that something that you deal with people in the counseling room?
Okay. Yeah, there's a significant part of me that's very tempted to ask you some specific questions, but I won't. So I think
let's just get into therapy. I'll sign off on a disclosure.
Yeah, is when does the pattern of like repeated negative outcome become the belief, right?
Right.
Yeah, and I mean I think that's sort of what we were talking about earlier, right? Is you have these kind of a reinforced pattern, right, that can become the belief. And so when it's always tricky for me as a therapist trying to kind of tease out what's the appropriate intervention or something, because sometimes it's just as simple as sounds simple as using a Rogerian approach where you just all that's required really is to sit with somebody and to let them know that regardless of what they think about themselves or what they've done or they're afraid that they are or whatever, nothing will in this relationship drive me away from regarding you positively. So that power of what do I call it? The power of presence and of shared regard is it sounds like you're not actually doing any work, but I've actually found that usually it's been the most powerful predictor of change when I do that. There's a big part of me, I mean, I've got a garage full of tools and I love working on things and I love reaching for tools, right? And like fixing things. I love doing that. And so there's always a big temptation in me when I'm working with clients to try and do that, like to come fix, to bring some psychological intervention that's going to change things. And often what I found is that it's actually just creating space in myself, but also in the relationship, just to be present together in this. I found that unbelievably powerful. So that's one element, probably the most important. But then there's also kind of a process of like trying to figure out a little bit of like what's going on there. And so I'll use like a lot of that tell me about that language. Let's talk about that. And that kind of circles back to what we initially started with, right? About bringing some of these things we're afraid of to speech, actually talking about them, bringing them out. Because often, like, we maybe think we know, but the more we talk, we're like, oh, now that I say that, it sounds funny. Or now that I bring that out, it's like, oh, okay, I'm kind of surprised I thought that way or something. Or sometimes it's like, oh, it's just so good to say that. And you can just, like the relief you see on some people's faces sometimes when it's like, oh man, I've been carrying that for a long time and that needed to be said, right? That secret became so heavy. And so that can be kind of I really don't like sounding like a flake is hard. It feels hard not to how to sound that way, but like the gift of my attention to somebody that it's like I'm wanting to see who you are and to find out why it is that we're feeling the way we are. Yeah, how we got to here. There is a kind of on the other side of that, right? Is like once you've kind of you feel like you've been seen and heard and held and cared and attended to and all that, sometimes people want like strategies for like, well, how do I stop being here, right? Like I'd rather be somewhere else. Like how do I get there? And that's where like collaboration is so powerful, because often like the solution a client comes up with is a better predictor of good outcome than anything I bring usually. Right? Like I do have lots of tools we can bring, like CBT was one of them. Really like a lot of ideas from narrative therapy, of externalizing. I think IFS has some really powerful tools about learning to kind of create that space for ourselves, like listening to the own little parts of us. Like I would do with someone in therapy, is giving a part of us their attention. That can be very helpful as well. Like a solution focused lens can be really great. I know I work with couples a lot, so I use some of the tools from John and Julie Gottman. They've got tons of simple little skills you can kind of work on, like practice to avoid some of that like accuse defend cycle that just derails everything, and like remain in conversation with people. But I'd say underlying all of that, to be honest with you, Matthew, is just that willingness to share myself as a person with another person. And I've done lots and lots of different jobs in my life. I worked as like a landman, laborer. I've done tons of different stuff that's been physically demanding. There's no harder work I've ever done than this.
Wow.
It is intensely personal work. I cannot do it without bringing myself as a person to the job. And it's immensely rewarding. I really love doing it is easily the hardest work I've ever done.
Wow.
That deeply personal work. Anyway, little tiny bit of self-disclosure there for you, but it's very hard. It's frightening. It's vulnerable. It requires a ton of emotional energy. And so I respect that. Like when a client comes in to see me in therapy, that it sounds like, oh, we're just sitting around talking, but it's hard work. Yeah. But work worth doing. Yeah. I can't remember what you asked me, Matthew. That's so terrible. There's a little rant I went on with you.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
One of the comments you made is almost like coaching out or coaxing out that negative belief. And I know you do a lot of couples therapy. And I mean, for all of us that are in relationships or been in relationships, I think we can all agree and understand it's like there's times where you're having an argument about something, but it's not really about the something.
Yeah.
There's a famous TV show or movie where I think it's Everybody Loves Raymond, where it's like a pie and they're arguing about a pie, but they're not really arguing about the pie. And Raymond goes, sometimes it's just about the pie. But my point is, I mean, you're in therapy with two people, and how does those negative belief statements impact the ability for two people to be able to connect and communicate around an issue? Because couples are going to have issues, but how does that negative belief statement get in the way of that connection?
Okay, yeah. So certainly, yeah, could get in the way of connection. Yeah, if it's a belief that refuses care, right? Refuses the other. So it's like the protector is strong in those moments, and you're just like, I don't want to be wounded again or anymore. And it holds someone at arm's length, for sure. I get that.
Even like that whole accuse,
defend, yeah.
defend, right? I mean, in a lot of ways, I mean, the accusing could really be pressing on a negative belief that the other person has. And that can be, even if it was very politely said, it can be very painful.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, I'm not sure how to say this. The negative belief can also be the opportunity for the relationship to actually mean something, right? It's not just the two of us kind of coasting through life, going on vacations and going golfing and whatever. This is the level where we are who we are. right? Is like, and if you have the opportunity with someone that you love, that you're committed to actually let them see you, right? Like that's wrapped up in the negative beliefs, but also the positive beliefs. They're kind of at the they can be at the same level. It's just the one feels more covered in shame, right? It's harder to share. You're worried that it's going to be excluded. But if you get to a point where you can take a, let me call that a step of faith. You can open yourself to trust and to be trusted. Well, my experience with people and even personally is that suddenly you're connected at the level you didn't even know you could find connection. That is the sense of belonging that we've all been that we all desperately want, right? Is like even with all my junk, right? Even with me as my negative thoughts and my negative behaviors, my hurtful things that I've done, I still feel like I belong, that I'm wanted and held here. And so I do often work, like there's a reason people are together to begin with, right? Like usually, right? There's enough kind of feeling of connection and enjoyment with each other there, but it just gets stuck on that level of woundedness, of expectations. Like I really hoped that maybe you'd be this to me, or right, that we'd be here by now or something. And sometimes it can be those negative beliefs about, it's like, well, I'm not that, or I can never be that, or anyway, something like that, where we get kind of to the level of talking about what those look like. And then it becomes a choice. Is like, am I going to choose to have compassion on the person with me, to love them in their suffering, to be with them, or does it hurt too much and I've got to go? And that happens sometimes too. That's always hard. It makes me as a therapist feel like a failure, but sometimes that happens. But more often than not, when you get to the point with another person that you feel that you can share some of those negative beliefs about yourself with them, every now and again they'll layer on like another layer of criticism that kind of hurts. It's like, ouch, like I'm a third party here, that one hurt me, right? Like that hurts. That happens sometimes. But often it's, oh man, I'm sorry you feel that way, right? You can enter into the pain of into each other's pain and be supportive. I think that's kind of what everyone really wants at the end of the day, because nobody's really got all their stuff together enough to have no negative beliefs, right? Anyway, yeah. I do.
Oh, sorry, you were saying.
I was just tagging on. I do quite a bit of work with people around that concept of forgiveness, what that actually looks like and means, and thinking about the different layers of it. Forgiveness and also acceptance. This is where we're at. And yeah, that can be quite a beautiful moment in therapy as well. You were going to say something there.
Oh, it's so good. No, it's really good. Even outside of romantic relationships, like I have one of the greatest ways that I have developed friendships and like depth in friendships is I take down my walls and I'll say, "Hey, Dave, I'm working through X, or I'm struggling with this, or I just believe this about myself." And not always, and there are some people that I don't feel comfortable doing this with because I just don't trust them. But for the majority of people I've done that with, what typically is reciprocated back is empathy and acceptance. And it's been an amazing yet scary science experiment on building relationships. And yeah, there's something about that vulnerability that really does build up incredible relationships when people can be like, okay, I see that they're an ordinary human being. They're working through tough stuff. Last question I have for you, Dave, and this has been such a great conversation. If someone is listening to this interview as a thought or a belief that they've been afraid to say out loud, what would you say to them? What would be your advice to them if you had one thing to say?
I had one thing to say. Oh, I would say something like, "Man, do I get that?" Yeah, I love encouraging people, but often it's easier to encourage someone else than to do it yourself. Do you know what I mean? It can be.
Like, you
And
mean like it's easier to encourage others than it is to encourage ourselves?
oh yeah, to see that other people are capable of doing something, no problem. But then you think, oh, I got to do that myself. That's really hard, right?
Mm.
So I like to encourage people to do things, but I also, yeah, I know what you're talking about. Like sometimes you have to model that vulnerability, and so I've done that with some of my clients, like kind of as an encouraging model. It's like they know self disclosure, like of a therapist to a client. It's usually most beneficial if I explain like kind of how I'm experiencing the client in the moment, that kind of self-disclosure, as opposed to like, well, let me tell you my whole life story, usually a little less helpful.
You think you had problems?
For sure. But on a lot of these things, like when you're trying to learn a new skill, it's like, well, I've never seen that done before. I don't even know what you're talking about. And so I'll sometimes model that with my own life. Maybe that's why some of this work is so hard. But I try and keep myself in that space where I don't ask someone to do what I haven't tried to do myself. And there have been times in my life where it's like, man, I've got something I need to say. Who in the world do I say this to? And I've been to see people, like just basically a stranger, right? Just sit there and talk. And sometimes that's what I provide to people. Not in the business of judging people, but I'm trying very hard to be in the business of hearing people, giving them my attention, letting them say what they need to say. And sometimes you can do that in whatever, a 50-minute session. Sometimes that takes a long time to even figure out what it is you got to say. But being with someone who you truly trust has your best interest in heart, actually does care, and has some tools that can help, I've found for a lot of people that really goes a long way in just walking a hard path together. So that's what I try to offer my clients. Yeah, it's a journey worth going on.
I agree. Dave, thank you so much for your time today. I've really enjoyed our conversation. We covered a lot of ground. If you'd like to connect with Dave and discuss some of these topics, or maybe work through some of the negative beliefs or thoughts you have of yourself, feel free to reach out and get more information about Dave and our entire team at www.masterscounseling.com. Thank you, Dave, for your time today. Really value you.
Great chatting with you, Matthew.